Hello, my name is Karlis Jansons, and I'm here to speak to you on the art of engineering communications. I received my license to practice in Ontario in 1983 and have been a member of OSPE ever since its inception. And I'd like to thank OSPE for the opportunity to present on a subject that is close to my heart and that I see as critically important to our profession. And thank you for joining me on this journey. By way of background, I'm a geotechnical engineer and have been in the business for 40 years, all of it in one form of engineering or another. And apologies if my examples drift into geotechnical, but hopefully you will see the applicability to the other disciplines. Let's talk about precision. We have to ask ourselves, is it more important to be simply precise or effective? Precision has its place, don't get me wrong, we have to be correct. But as engineers, we do need to be concerned about our effectiveness. And consider also precision versus accuracy. Aristotle wrote that it's the mark of an educated mind to rest satisfied with the degree of precision that the nature of the subject admits, and not seek exactness when only an approximation is possible. Precision, what does it mean? We use formulas which by their very nature can give an apparent precision or accuracy of several decimal places. This is what I call the fifth decimal place. What use is it if you had to estimate several of the factors used and perhaps made assumptions along the way? Be clear on the need for accuracy. What sense is there in giving a bearing pressure of 105.2 kilopascals when 100 kilopascals is sufficient? Or perhaps both numbers are so low as to drive the project to another solution. Often we think that the more decimal places we carry, the more accurate or better the number. In computer science, they have a saying for this: GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And I propose that it is critically important to be effective in communicating your solution to the client. Of course, you need to be correct, but not necessarily precise. Consider fact versus opinion. Be clear on dealing with fact or opinion. Understand the importance of each of them and which one you are dealing with. When writing, presenting, or discussing with others, identify which it is that you are stating. But to identify it, you also have to know it. Seems self-evident, doesn't it? Ponder what you are saying or writing. Your calculations and assessment may be correct, but the approach you are recommending may still be an opinion. It is your truth. Let's go to text and language. Be very judicious with the use of boilerplate material, or material that reads like a textbook. You are not there to teach the client, but rather inform them of the conditions likely to be encountered and how those conditions may be dealt with. Understand the client and who will use the information. Give options, not textbook, and be relevant. Steer the project, but don't control it. If you are going to limit or restrict the client's design, then say why. Clients need and usually prefer options. You can help them select the optimum one for their project. Understand criticism. Perhaps you or the client, or both, have misunderstood the scope. Be open and understand. It may not be you, but be reflective and learn. My partner has a saying posted over her desk. Effective communication is the responsibility of the sender. If the client says, I don't get it, it's on you, not on them. Be prepared to back up your report or design verbally. Although we present most of our findings in writing, we should practice our verbal presentation skills also. Get on the phone to the client, see if they have any questions. Clarity early on is very important. Be clear in your language. Don't make the client guess or assume that the client will realize what you really want. Do not assume that a conclusion should be obvious after you have dazzled them with your proficiency at juggling numbers. If you are stating there is a problem, then be prepared to discuss the potential solutions. Also be prepared for the client to go on a somewhat different path than you have recommended. There are many moving parts on a project, and your section is just one part thereof. Know the site and project limitations. If the solution goes beyond your mandate, then be clear and understand what your battery limits are. Discuss these with the client. Keep communications open. You'll see that one repeats several times. Has the project changed or evolved since you took it on? Engineers need to convey the conditions and solutions in a clear and concise manner. Cut and paste reports happen, but if it's obvious to the reader, then the standard phrases and paragraphs have not been integrated properly. They are dangerous and should be used with caution. If you are going to pull something forward from another report, you need to understand what and why you are using it. Even boilerplate limitations can be incorrect in certain situations. Retyping is a good practice, as it forces you to consider what is written. I've seen engineers pull text from other reports and not even consider the basics, such as significantly different water levels, even different soils. And it's painful to read boilerplate that when it obviously comes from a different project. Understanding. You need to understand what the client wants and what the project needs. They may be the same, but not always. Understand the level of the project. Is the client just examining potential development ideas? Is the intent to put some flesh on the bones of a concept? Or is it a final design? Provide a report that adds value to the proposition. Do not provide a detailed design report if that's not what's required, even if you're going to present all the parameters. A report at the conceptual stage should discuss more on the what-ifs and provide more commentary on the pros and cons of different approaches. If in doubt, provide more than is asked, and leave the options open. For instance, if a site requires dewatering or some other form of excavation that may be more expensive than you think practical, do not simply insist on raising the basement to avoid apparently costly issues. Raising a structure can have other cost effects that you may not be aware of, or there may be restrictions because of piping, connections, or the like. The worst thing you can say is raise the building and then walk away. If a client is pushing you in a particular direction, don't be offended. They probably know more about the overall subject matter than you. Better to understand what they want and why. If they are simply after some soil parameters, then so be it. And don't embarrass yourself by telling a design team with a collective knowledge of several hundred years that you know better, and you will tell them so. Consider all the elements of grammar, sentence structure, paragraph structure, and report structure. If you need or want to separate the factual information from the engineering discussion, then do so clearly by having separate sections in the report, or even a separate report. If you are creating for a space for factual information separate from the engineering, then make sure you do it properly. I've seen many instances where the author of a factual section drifts into providing a how to do this, how to do that. And don't ask the client to split out the information. If they ask for the information to be presented separately, then provide two reports. It's much clearer and therefore easier for both you to produce and for the client to use. And your report will be used by others. Understand that. You may put in limitations, but that in and of itself will not prevent a lawsuit. And innocent or not, a lawsuit is a difficult and costly affair. More difficult emotionally if you are innocent. And you can believe all the horror stories your grandmother told you. Let's go to scope now. If you based your assessment on a particular set of drawings, conceptual 90% or something in between, then be clear on that point. But also understand that if something was shown on an earlier version, you are responsible for having seen that. The longer you take to deliver a report, the more time a project has to change and grow. And don't be embarrassed to say that things have changed. However, a client simply issuing 90% drawings where you started with 30% is not necessarily the reason to ask for extras or to deny the findings of your report. If it is essentially the same project, then it is. But if there are changes of significance, then open a dialogue with the client and articulate these to them. Most of you went into engineering not because of your literary skills. Not to say that engineers are an illiterate bunch. To the contrary, we have an interest in a lot of things, including the written word. But let's face it, we prefer numbers. They are our friends. If we can find the fifth decimal place, then we are ecstatic. The world will marvel in amazement at our achievements, but somewhere along the way there are those of us, and not few in number, that have neglected the proper conveyance of our findings. We are happy to present our findings in a technical, peer-reviewed journal where the audience are like us, each in love with the numbers and the formulae. But how are we at communicating with other engineers and clients whose technical expertise are in a different field? The upshot is simply this: we as an industry have to improve. Some of that happens at the company level with a focus on mentoring, which is one of my favorites, and on sponsoring courses in English. But the onus is on the individual engineer to improve their skills. Most professional licensing bodies have continuing education requirements. Use some of those hours to improve both written, oral, and presentation skills. Over my career, I have benefited from numerous courses, both in-house and externally provided, particularly in contracts. Contracts, as most of us know, are the way we control the legal, fiscal, and liability issues between parties. Even if you will not be writing or reviewing contracts, understanding them is a good way to appreciate what means what regarding the written word. Now on to review. Reports must be internally reviewed. In critical cases, the authoring company should engage their own external reviewer before giving the report to the client. The client is not there to take your draft report and fix it. A draft should be essentially complete. The client should be just checking for factual correctness. Technical accuracy and an understandable and complete presentation are the author's responsibility. Is the report devoid of verbiage that can give rise to litigation? It's important to monitor one's own language. For instance, the word ensure is an often used word, and it's usually misused. In most instances I have encountered, its use was improper. It's like guaranteeing something. An external reviewer's role is more for accuracy and for suggesting possible alternate solutions. They should be engaged in the process sufficiently early so as to influence the laboratory testing, the analysis, and the engineering analysis. Make sure you are heading in the same direction, at least by project midpoint. You don't want to go to an outside reviewer at the end, only to have your report come back covered in red ink. And as we are approaching the end, let's consider punctuality. Don't make promises that can't be kept. If you commit to a deadline, you must deliver. The client has their own deadlines of which you may or may not be aware. Perhaps they have to include your report in a submission to the government. And don't mistake the application deadline for your deadline to the client. If something comes up to delay, then communicate that to the client right away. The worst reason to be late is we wanted to make the report better. You may be surprised when the client hears from you that you will be late. They're okay with that, and they'll let you know. And if they're not okay, they'll similarly let you know and let you know why. And this may seem like an obvious issue to some, but if it is due Friday, is that AM, PM, end of the business day, or is it simply sufficient to be time-stamped for Friday? And I'll leave you with this thought. Paraphrase from a movie, but words are important. If you cannot say what you mean, you will never mean what you say. I thank you very much for your attention and wish you well in your careers. Have a nice day.